Did it scare anyone away, or are you all still here? You're fully in? Okay, good. Glad to hear it. How many of you found that just ministry is just super easy? Right? Any church planters in the room? Okay, I've been there. Any churches, I don't know your network that well, but any megachurch, people on the staff of a megachurch in here? I've been in those settings, all right. How about networks of churches? Some of you are network leaders, yep, okay, been part of those. Any other sort of, how about a spouse of a pastor? Raise your hands up high. All right, we see you. Good, good, good. Thank you. Yep, those have all been part of the journey that I've been on. And I'm delighted to come today with an invitation that might seem a little dull or who has time for that kind of thing. So I want to suggest that many of the times I'm talking to a room full of what I call jet fuel drinking, hair on fire leaders. Does that describe you? You're the jet fuel drinkers, right? It's like, how far can we go? How fast can we jump? Where do we go? What's the next hill we climb? And I resonate with the energies of a jet fuel drinker, but I also have generally learned the hard way to learn how to be what I call a candle lighter. How many of you are also candle lighters? Yes, thank you. Thank you, I see you, a couple of you in the room. Maybe by the end of it, we'll all sort of admit our both jet fuel drinking tendencies and candle lighting needs. So I am, with the grace of God, going to figure out how to turn on and show you. Ooh, do you see that? Look at that. Okay, here we go. Now, if we can figure out the advancing, do we see the next one? No. We might look at that one for a long time. Let's see. Any coaching anyone has to give me on how to turn that from this to the thing that says what's next, I'm happy to do it. But in the meantime, I want you to turn to the person next to you and try to explain to them why your job is harder than theirs. I'm serious. All right, so who had the hardest job in the room? Anybody want to try? All right. All right, maybe that's the case. Maybe that's the case. Of all the different kind of jobs that I've had, and many of them have been very challenging, and I think God equips us to do challenging work. There's things in the world that really do need to be done. And they're not all easy, and we need to bring the best of our abilities and even sacrificial service at times. But those assignments can sometimes really wreck with your soul health. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. This is the view I get to see because after all of church planting in Boston and working in and around Willow Creek and the Willow Creek Association, and then brought to Boulder, Colorado through the work of a tech company called Glue that I worked with them for about 9 years. Then I left Glue after this tiny little thing called a pandemic. You might have noticed it. And during that, I came to realize that this message that God had impressed on my own life and in my journey around the priority of the care of the soul was actually something that I always knew it was the most important thing undergirding our life of service, but a lot of times people had better things to do. It wasn't the top priority. And coming out of the pandemic, it became clear that more and more organizations and staff teams and all kinds of people were saying, hey, Mindy, would you come talk to us? Would you come talk to our group? Would you help facilitate a retreat? Would you do this, that, and the other? And I realized that God was opening a door to this message that in the years that I've been journeying with it had never been this open. And I believe we're still in that season of openness, and I believe you all and other organizations I've been working with are part of a new wave God is bringing forward a new resolution, a new resolve in the hearts of leaders to function from a place of health. And there is a collective, deep refusal to go back to the craziness that has in many ways marked a lot of our leadership journeys. So that's where we're going today. I could not be more aligned with the goals and the priorities of this organization. I had the chance to meet the leaders a couple of years ago at a gathering, and we've been tracking ever since. My hope today is to do service to this topic in a way that would honor the deep commitment to the life of service that you each have, and also gently, if we can, start to look at the well-being of our souls in the context of our work, with the goal of saying, maybe for the first time for you, or maybe just as an encouragement in your continued journey, maybe, just maybe, the well-being of your soul could be a first-order priority. Sound good? You down? Good. Well, too bad, because you can leave, because that's where we're going. All right, so our topic is called Ignite Your Soul, and the idea is how can we move from burnout to flourishing in ministry? All right, so I showed you this picture. This is going to be fun now. I'm going to go to town on this iPad thing here. That's the views I get to see in Boulder, Colorado all the time, and this is a picture of my crazy fun family. And two of my sons, all three of the boys, you can guess which one is my husband. And then those are my three daughters-in-law. Shout out to those in the room who are raising girls. When you get them fully baked, it's awesome. Oh my gosh, I didn't have to go through puberty or getting boyfriends or any of that stuff, and they are amazing. They are amazing. So those are my sons. Two of them work with me with Soul Care, with the work we do. And that picture was taken on a piece of property that God has brought us into the stewardship of in Boulder. One of the most craziest, miraculous journeys I've ever been on. But you can see it's an engagement party between the guy with his hand in the air and the beauty that is being held by the rest of the ladies. And behind his head, can you see a stand of trees that's super charred and black? I don't know if the lights are such that you can see that. Okay, you can. Good, thanks. We'll get back to that. Okay, here's a thought experiment for you to turn and talk to with whoever's next to you. What do the town of Assisi, Italy, Harvard University, the YMCA, and Arthur Andersen have in common? Understand the question? All right, turn and talk. I'll call us back really quickly. What do those four things have in common? All right, has anyone gotten past the letter A? Okay, some of you started there. Anyone want to take a guess? What do these four things have in common? We're just like a big small group. We can do this. They were Christian. Actually, I don't know for sure with Arthur Andersen. That is a plot point fact check that I still need to do. But what I can say with great certainty is the city of Assisi, Italy, if you were to go there today, you could probably buy trinkets and things like that were about Francis, St. Francis, the Francis of Assisi. But the city itself would in no way bear the fire that St. Francis had for the gospel, for the person of Jesus, for service to the poor, for a life of discipleship. Harvard, you probably know, began as a place to train Christian leaders. The slogan for Harvard used to be Veritas in Christos, which was truth in Christ. Somewhere along the line, the in Christos got dropped. The YMCA, in many places still, is known as a place for both evangelism and discipleship, the Young Men's Christian Association, right? Some places it really is still quite effective in those regards, but in popular culture it's mostly known as the song by the Village People, and it's a service place in a community, but it's not known for the fire. And Arthur Andersen is a kind of an odd one in this list. The company that bears the founder's name, at the time of the writing of the other thing that these four things have in common, was a company that was founded on his integrity, his ability to help people with their taxes and understanding accounting and all that kind of stuff. At the time of a writing of an article that all four of these were mentioned in, written by Dallas Willard, Arthur Andersen was this key player in this central drama that led to one of the biggest recessions in our memory, the Enron scandal. So Arthur Andersen, this incredible bastion of reliable, trustworthy accounting, was in the middle of it. Now, I'm not going to read this whole thing, but in an article called Living in the Vision of God, Dallas Willard, philosopher, scholar, pastor, was answering the question, why is it that things that start with such an incredible fire for God, out of such purity of devotion, such central focus, how is it that sometime later they not only might not bear that resemblance, they might be the exact antithesis of the thing that started it all? Which is a very interesting question. I don't know if you can read this very well from where you're sitting, but I'll try to skip through parts of it. In this article, Willard says, what then is the general pattern? Intense devotion to God by the individual or group brings substantial outward success. And that success brings a sense of accomplishment and a sense of responsibility for what has been achieved and for further achievement. The mission increasingly becomes the vision. And when that happens, the last sentence, goals occupy the place of the vision of God in the inward life, and we find ourselves caught up in a visionless pursuit of various goals, grinding it out. This is the point at which service to Christ replaces love for Christ. Now, just about a year ago, last month, the North American contingent for the Lausanne Conference, some of you may have been there, gave a report on the gospel, the status of the Great Commission in North America. And people who know that I care about this topic of burnout and organizational flourishing sent me this article. And again, I won't read the whole thing. The entire report was maybe 15 pages long. Within that 15 pages, one of the main points was the future of leadership. And in the context of the future of leadership, the writers of this, who were mainly connected to or at the Wheaton College Billy Graham Center, had to say this: across regions, ministry specialization, and cultures, few challenges registered as consistently and urgently as the toll of ministry burnout. The pandemic certainly accelerated both in terms of scope and severity, as pastors and ministry leaders were often left to bear the weight of their communities and organizations. And this is significant, guys. Yet while the pandemic exacerbated the crisis, the seeds of ministry burnout are generational. That should give us pause. They are generational, and the result is a clergy and ministry force near its breaking point. Now, when I was coming up in ministry in the 80s, some of you may know this, was the phrase that we were often recruited with. Does anybody remember this? Jeff, I'm not going to call on you. I mean, what a profound lack of imagination. Why were those the only two options? Did we never think maybe there should be at least a third way? I don't know. But it would appear to me that we're totally reaping what we've sown. The current leadership reality that I experience, reflected in Willard's article about a pattern that far precedes the pandemic, and the Wheaton Billy Graham Center. Our team, my work, all around the country, in many other places around the world, would suggest that we are dealing with levels of burnout, flame out, which is the career-ending, headline-making fruit of an inner life that is just imploded. And the dropout is the kind of quiet quitting, when there's just I'm done. I'll show up. I don't have any other way to get a paycheck right now, but I'm gone. That, my observation would be, is the biggest issue facing the body of Christ. Do I care about discipleship? Yes. Do I care about church planting? Yes. Do I care about growth and multiplication and all those things? Yes. But all of them are secondary to the priority of living from a healthy soul, because they all are results of something else. They are fruit of an inner life. And until we start thinking about this systemically, we're only going to start trying to put out fires where they exist and not dealing with the entire system. Because what it starts to look like for me is the valley of dry bones. I get to walk in Texas, or go walk in Michigan, or walk in South Florida, or walk in California, or walk in Australia, or walk in wherever I am with a bunch of amazing leaders who are deeply called of God, who are so devoted to the work, and who seem kind of fine. But when we're honest, when we're having side conversations, we're finding out, man, they're never going to leave. They're devoted to Jesus, but they're so dry. Now, there was a season in my life as a mom when we had 3 teenage boys in the house, and which is a very expensive season of parenting. But it was also a time when the nightly conversation at the dinner table centered around what to do in the case of a zombie apocalypse. Did any of you have that kind of conversations at dinner? Maybe that just tells you a little bit about us and our household. But yes, this was an active conversation. And for the record, before I make another point, Costco is the place to go if there is a zombie apocalypse. That was the clear winner. Okay, so, but in that unlikely event, let's assume that's not going to be the case. Around that time, there were all the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. Did you guys love all those? Okay. Do you remember Captain Barbossa and the guys that were the pirates on the Black Pearl, right? The zombie pirates. Now, the zombie pirates were kind of interesting. They looked fully alive. They could fight. They could cause harm. They could talk. They could do all the things. But they were the undead. They couldn't die. Remember? But they couldn't experience pleasure. They couldn't taste food. And I remember at that time thinking, that's kind of like what starts to happen among the leaders that I get to walk around, is that we're kind of going through the motions, but we become desensitized. We can't feel joy, we can't feel pain, we're sort of numb. And do you remember how you could tell in one of those battle scenes which ones were the zombie pirates versus the regular pirates? Do you remember how you could tell? Come on, this is for I'll give you a prize. Does anybody remember this? Moonlight, thank you. Who was that? Who had that? I heard it over here. All right, okay, a couple zombie experts. Here's what is so interesting. In that movie, you'll recall that, this battle scene is going, and then the clouds at night part, and all of a sudden the moonlight falls on the scene, and you can see them for what they are. And they're just dry bones. And the same, again, is true with us. We are going through the motions. We're teaching every week. We're leading our teams. We're leading our boards. We're doing all the different things. But catch us in the right light, and you'll see what's really going on. When a board meeting doesn't go our way, when somebody gives us some unwanted feedback in a hallway conversation, when one of our kids does something that could embarrass us or the church. When you catch us in the right light, you can see who we are. And I don't think that's the way God means for this to be. Now again, there's no shame if anyone in this room right now is in a stage of severe or mild or any kind of burnout. Please know that that's the state of many people in ministry right now. And I believe God is breathing, as he did in Ezekiel, a new breath over his people, and is breathing his life into those slain, who, recall, were a global army. They were not just people hanging out, thinking about your church and whether or not they wanted to follow God. These were those who had been contending for God's purposes. In Matthew, the verse in the NIV, or most translations, about the yoke being easy and the burden being light, which may not be what it feels like right now for you. The paraphrase from Eugene Peterson gives us a really beautiful picture of, I think, Jesus' heart, and it gives us fresh language that might re-invite you into the idea. Jesus saying to you and to me and to his followers throughout history, are you tired, worn out, maybe burned out by religion? What does he say? Straighten up and fly right, put a new strategy in place? What does he say? Yes, come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you, he says, how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Is Jesus strategic about the future of the church? Yeah. Yeah. Is Jesus here to seek and save that which is lost? Yeah. Is he still running around giving us the invitation to follow? Yes. But it's a relational invitation. Watch how I do it, he says. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. And if any part of that just sort of resonates for you today, I would maybe just take note of whatever word or phrase that is. What part of that invitation from Jesus do you need to hear this afternoon? Like right now? Is it rest? Is it easy? Is it light? Is it watch? There was a time a few years ago now that I got a very new perspective on burnout. I had gone through my own very heavy and severe burnout in the 90s when we were church planting in Boston. Any people in here from New England or Boston? Yeah, it's pretty far from the heart of Texas. Boston is a really tricky place to do ministry. Not that any place doesn't have its own trickiness, but Boston was, they called it the graveyard of preachers. Chuck Swindoll got kicked out of a church in Boston. Yeah, it takes a lot to kick Chuck Swindoll out. But anyway, that's the nature of it. And all of the passion that I have around the care of the soul came out of the implosion that I suffered at that time. And that thankfully didn't end my life, didn't end my ministry life, didn't end my love and devotion to God. But everything that has happened in my life since then has come out of the overflow of this one resolve of living from a healthy soul. In December of 2021, so coming up on 4 years ago, that was a picture that I took outside my home that was kind of outskirts of Boulder, Colorado. It's a suburb. And I took that picture, and you can't tell that the wind is blowing in a crazy way because the sky looked like what it sometimes looked like in the news reports from California. And sure enough, what unfolded over the next 12 hours was the worst damaging wildfire in Colorado history. It didn't cover the most land because stuff that burns up in the mountains goes farther, but this was 120 mile per hour winds pushing a 2,000 to 3,000 degree fire after house after house after house. And so I took that picture facing a little, do you see the roof? You might not be able to see it, but at the very bottom there's a roof of an elementary school that our backyard faced. And a couple of hours later, we noticed this on Twitter. That's our house, circled at 6:30 or something that night. That was 6:15. The other picture was taken at 12:30 in the afternoon. And we thought for sure our home was going to be consumed with all the others, but in fact, it was the line that they were able to finally hold before and stop these fires in the middle of the night before it ravaged the rest of the entire town. That's me looking at one of my neighbor's homes the next morning, and this is what it looked like from the sky. And over those 12 hours, we lost in our community 1,100 structures, 1,100 homes. Devastating. And that little plot of land that we call Whisper Ranch, that God called Whisper Ranch, that our son, you saw the picture with the charred, this was a shed. It's kind of bougie, but it's a shed that I was leading some retreats for pastors in, not 10 days before the fire, and that's what it looked like after the fires. And in the days and weeks and months that came, among many other important things, it gave me a whole new understanding of burnout and a near constant visual through these charred and very dead trees of what it's like when a resource is completely spent. This is, you can see in the background here, do you see that pointed tip right there? That's the new dream shed that was built in the months after the fire. But this one tree with these, I think, achingly beautiful branches became for me sort of iconic and representative of the beauty and the invitation into desolation. And so often in our Christian environments, we want to kind of get to the up and to the right, and how is it all going to be great in the end? And I assure you, under God, all things do resolve. But there are times and seasons where we have to pause in grief and in lament and face what is gone and never coming back. And I began calling that and this grove of trees the Garden of Desolation. And again, it gave me a lot of things to think about with burnout. Like, what is burnout? I'm not a clinical psychologist. Whole PhD programs could be written about what burnout is. But I find one of the ways that is helpful for me to think about it is when there's a certain amount of resource or reserves. And you think about this even in the other kind of place we use a financial, or the imagery of burning is in our finances. Right? We talk about exhausting the funds in an account, or we talk about what is your burn rate. That is the same concept, the same metaphor of something that is burning. There is a concrete or discrete amount of a thing, and when it gets exhausted, there's no shame, there's no harm. That just means there's none left. And in ministry, when you are giving, when you are leading, when you are showing up with whatever your gifts are, it's teaching, it's mercy, it's administration, whatever it is, when you expend yourself, even Jesus knew when power had left him. If that's true of the God of the universe in the person of Jesus, isn't it quite likely that every time one of us stands in a space and offers something of ourselves for the good of God's people, broadly understood, there's going to be a depletion. And there's no shame in depletion. There is none. That is how the system works. The problem is when we don't have a strategy for replenishment, when we don't have a way of life that allows us to receive and give and receive and give. And we embed that way of life into normal life, not like a 3-month thing when you're dying and you can't gasp for air and then you try to come back and go at it again. That might keep you in the game, but it's not embedded into your life. This is what is changing, is God is now creating increased willingness among leaders to arrange their lives and rearrange if necessary in order to live and lead out of fullness and to reject the continual giving and giving and giving out of something that just is not there. Like if I always hesitate to say this, but I'll say it just because it's kind of fun. If I came to your organization or your ministry, like, does anybody have any like financial goals between now and year end that would really make a big difference if like some huge donations came in, right? Probably, right? Okay, so I know every organization I'm part of, that's the case. So if I came with my little tiny checkbook and wrote a check for, I don't know, $10 million and handed it to you, you might be like, awesome, that is great. Now, at what point will that not feel great? It will not clear. It just will not clear. It doesn't matter how much generosity I have in my heart. It does not matter how important your cause is or worthy it is. It doesn't matter any of that stuff, because that's going to hit an account and the account's going to go, sorry. We can give you the $350 that's still in the account, but that's not how those checks work. And I don't mean to make light. I hope God does give you people that can write and have the checks clear for 10 million or however much you need. But we understand it in math. We understand it in finances. But sometimes in ministry, we're writing checks that can't clear. We're saying yes to a commitment. We're saying yes to starting a new thing. We're saying yes to, and maybe they could clear if we were arranging our lives around the filling that we need. But we tend to write those checks and then say, but I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. We slap a bunch of Bible verses on everything. And I think God's done with it. He's not going to be played anymore. It's time for us to reconcile ourselves to these truths deeply, permanently. And the best news is what goes on the other side of that. But let's stay here for another minute longer. What is it that keeps us from caring for our soul as a first order priority? That's some C.S. Lewis language. And there's lots of things. The pace of life, and it's the same here in Houston as everywhere else, just a little crazy. Unhealed wounds and trauma, friends, this is a huge topic. I'm barely going to touch on it. But what we're learning in our research, we're doing some research at Soul Care, it is really hard even to receive care when you are keeping at bay stuff that's from a long time ago. And thank God he doesn't bring it all up all at once. None of us could handle that. But there are seasons when we have to pursue the healing of those inner wounds. And it matters. It matters that you do. You are not some incidental cog in the divine wheel that's trying to get ministry done in Texas. You are a beloved child of God, and your well-being matters. Anyway, that's a whole other separate topic. Isolation, leadership can be extremely isolating. I'm sure many of you have found that to be the case. Self-reliance keeps us from caring for our souls because we kind of give God the Heisman and we're like, hey, I got it. The impossible demands that we find ourselves in. But the last one is the one that I tend to try to at least make sure we address together when we're in a gathering like this. And it's that I think we don't really have much in our evangelical imagination for the care of the soul, because at least in the environments I was raised in, the only time we talked about the human soul was with reference to its eternal destiny. Souls are either lost or found, they're saved or unsaved, and then once your soul is saved, then it's your job to get about the business of helping other people make that same decision. Now, I'm not saying that's not true, that is partial truth, but the bigger truth is your soul is not some inert little toggle switch that gets flipped on at salvation and then has no bearing on the rest of your life. We have got to recover, and this is not new now, this is an ancient understanding of the soul. We've got to recover a more integrated understanding of all the dimensions of ourself, all the dimensions of personhood. And if you need Bible verses to think about it, which most of us do, and we respect that, let's look at Jesus's probably most famous comment about the soul. What did he say? How could you possibly benefit if you gain the whole world but forfeit your soul, or what could you give in exchange for your soul? That would have been a question that we would have used in an evangelistic context, right? We would say that to somebody maybe considering a relationship with God. Don't chase after fame and fortune and miss eternity with God is kind of what we would mean. Does that resonate? Two issues with that. First, if you were looking at your Bible, I don't know if anybody's got a physical Bible and can look at it quickly, but you would see at the top of the paragraph who Jesus is talking to. Anyone want to guess? He's talking to his disciples, guys. Then and now. This is not an appeal he was making to the mighty throng to see if they might be interested in following him. This was very clearly what he was saying to the ones who had already dropped their nets and left everything to follow him. We don't usually think of it that way. Second thing is the text note at the bottom of most translations will point your attention to the same Greek word, suke. I have it up there, P-S-U-C-H-E. The same word is used in verse 25, which we think of as a high challenge discipleship verse. And it's the exact same word used in verse 26. In verse 25, it's translated life. Jesus saying to his disciples, if you would save your life, you must lose it. But if you would lose your life for my sake, you will find it. And how could you benefit if you gain the whole world but forfeit your soul? Now, friends, here's the main point of all I'm saying with that is we must understand the biblical concept of soul, both in the New Testament and with the Hebrew in the Old Testament, is that your soul is absolutely integrated with the very understanding of what your actual life is. Everything that makes you you, your mind, your emotions, your relationships, everything about you, to some extent, our body, everything is integrated and held together by this beautiful thing made in the image of God called your soul. And that's why it matters so very much that souls become saved, and yes, that they become formed and shaped into the likeness of Jesus. The soul is the the deepest power of life, or the deepest level of life and power in the human being. So where does that leave us? And how are our souls today? You're familiar with Jesus' teaching, returning to a metaphor of grafting several times in that Last Supper, where he knows he's leaving and having to bring the disciples into a different way of relating to him that they cannot in any way understand, nor would I if I had been in their place. But in John 15, he says, if you will remain in me, you will bear much fruit, right? We like that whole part. But apart from me, you can do nothing. And I was like confused by that when I was hospitalized and doing a whole lot of nothing. And God brought this to mind. And, I said, hey, Mindy, how about those 3 small groups you were leading that were having to memorize this verse? What about nothing didn't you understand? And guys, there's a lot about nothing, right? Psalm 139 tells us there's nowhere we can go from his presence. Romans tells us neither height nor depth or angels, even nothing can separate us from the love of God. So what did Jesus mean in this and other references during that Last Supper? Apart from me, you can do nothing. A couple years, many years after that, a tree fell down after a big windstorm in Chicago, and we lost half a tree. And I just sensed the Lord say, I want you to pay attention. Pay attention to what happens to that tree. In here, I'll tell you what happened. Right away, it looked perfectly fine. Like half of it was disconnected and pointing in the wrong direction, but it was still fluffy and green, and you would have thought it was fine if you didn't see the base. And it took, I don't know, a week or so before the leaves would wilt, and then eventually it got kind of crispy and you could tell they were dying. But it didn't happen right away. It wasn't like at the end of that Theron snap at the end of the superhero movie where everything disappears. When that disconnection happened, there was enough life in the system that it still appeared more or less fine, kind of pointing in the wrong direction, but fine. And guys, I think that's what happens with us. We don't mean to disconnect from God. Fundamentally, we're still in Christ. But when we disconnect, we get distracted, we get discouraged, we might be deceived, and we lose our real-time, in-the-moment sense of connection. That's what being grafted in gives us. Where through this connection point, not through our knowledge, not through our hard work, those are important, but they're not what causes connection. And through that point of connection is where the life force of the God of the universe moves out and through this point of connection and into our lives to bear whatever kind of fruit he wants to bear. We don't care about what's happening out there. I mean, of course we care, but we don't care. That's not the focus of our trying. The focus of our trying is the connection. And that's what so easily gets ripped apart when a windstorm comes through, or we're discouraged, or we get distracted. And so finding a way of life to keep us continually in the language of Jesus, which is always relational invitation, returning, remaining, connecting. Now, I mentioned we've been doing some work at Soul Care, and one of those things has been building a soul health assessment that if you want, we can take a few minutes right now, and we're almost done with this part of the session, then we'll have a little Q&A. But I'd love for you to pull out your phones, grab the QR code, and take a minute to fire through some questions, because I'd like to suggest, guys, that everything you care about in the bearing of much fruit is what is on the far side of your soul's real-time, in-the-moment connection with the living God, which, let's remember, is as near as your breath. So go ahead and take that. You'll get one of 3 result ranges, and then I think we'll just, while you're doing that, we'll get set up for a Q&A up here, and then we'll kind of go on from there. So take your time. Go ahead.
Mindy, my guess is that you piqued our curiosity and that the QR code is going to lead to a lot of questions and a lot of introspection that is needed. I've had the opportunity to do this QR code with you and receive some of your resources in the past. And so I really just kind of have one big takeaway question for you as we're wrapping up here, and we've got the opportunity to go into some breakouts to dive into some practical sides of ministry management. And this was the dive into our soul here a little bit, but how do you see that we can develop the security that we need to say no to the demands and expectations of ministry so that we can flourish in the way of Jesus?
The main thing that comes to mind is just to keep before us the question of what do you want?
As in, like, what do I want, Malcolm? What does Malcolm want?
In the moment of trying to choose, I have a bazillion things I need to go, but I'm already gasping for air. What should I do? That's what I'm hearing you say. Do I go create the next agenda, finish the next talk? Do I spin up a next volunteer team? Do I go do a new fundraising campaign? Do I start a new campus? All of which are arguably wonderful things.
You've been in ministry, I guess.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I love it. I love that we're in ministry. I'm still in ministry. I still have these decisions every day. Or, over and against all of that huge list of really mission critical, eternities hanging in the balance, all the ways we talk about this stuff, how do I sit on my couch with my cup of coffee in 10 minutes of silence to start my day? And when I say the question is the only way that for me and you and I hope all of us to say, what do I really want? What do I really want? Does the world need more of Mindy? Does the world need more of smart people working hard? I don't think so. I don't think the God-breathed things that our world needs are going to come from exhausted, overworked people trying to grind out more ministry. I don't think that's what we want. We're not used to asking ourselves if that's really what we want or admitting that that's what the case is.
Nor giving ourselves permission
No.
to say it.
No. Nobody gives themselves permission, but you now have permission. This is the permission giving day. Because it's not just permission, guys, it's an imperative. The care of your soul is a leadership imperative. The way we're feeling as we grind out ministry was never what Jesus had in mind. Never. I don't care how many locations and new sites get spun up. I don't care how many new. That's what smart people working hard gets done. What we need is our living in those unforced rhythms of grace and then seeing what the above and beyond anything you could have asked or imagined God might do. But we cannot architect our way there and grind it out of an ever-diminishing interior life. That was never what Jesus had in mind. I'm sorry, but that's,
I think it's a really helpful way for us to think about this is what do I really want? Do I really want what I've sung that I've said that I want? Do I really want what it is that I preach that I say that you want? Do I really want Jesus? Or do I want a better church, a better ministry, a bigger pulpit, more people following me, more campuses, more fish in my aquarium? Do I really want Jesus? And if I really want Jesus, and I let him be my security, then I can start to say no.
How on earth can we possibly be asking people to trust Jesus with their eternal life when we don't know how to trust Jesus with the outcome of a Sunday morning? Like, we have got to model trusting Jesus, not like I believe in these statements about Jesus' divinity. Trusting meaning putting your confidence in, the same way you're sitting on these chairs. You're not wondering, oh, is this chair going to hold me? You have confidence in that chair. How are you having a life of confidence in the living God? That's what we're building. And I would say, I love what you said about, like, do I just want Jesus? I want to push us beyond that. Of course we want Jesus. We want the life of following Jesus, of living in the contentment of living in this kingdom. And the far side of that is the bigger church, the more people being, or bigger or not, we stop caring. The ministry that God wants to do in and through our lives, we are yielded and surrendered, and he can do whatever he jolly well pleases. It's not up to us.
Well, I look forward to hearing more from you tomorrow. I believe we've got sometime tomorrow.
Yes,
We
yes.
want to take a moment here and be respectful to those who have put together the time for the breakouts. And so we want to encourage you all to reflect, to sit on this. And you've got some time today and tomorrow to reflect on it. Grab Mindy, maybe have a cup of coffee with her over at Citizens. But you are now released from this space to go into the next space. Go to Mindy's website for more details and sign up for her newsletters.
Oh, yes, we'd love to have you, but good to meet you all. Go to your workshops. They're going to be awesome.